Welcome to Dr. Roger and Friends, the bright side of longevity, hosted by 3 Ps in a podcast, Doc Roger, Teresa, and Danielle. Thanks for joining us for coffee and conversation. Molei Wright is recovering from a traumatic brain injury. As a fatal injury survivor, she's finding her way through a new life and learning new lessons constantly. Molei's unlikely journey has been highlighted in national and military print and local news in the U.S. Today, she joins us on Doc Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity, to share her story of hope and inspiration.
I'm lucky that something like this happened for me to realize what's important in my life and how I want to live.
Well, welcome, everybody. Glad you could join us once again. This is the third in a series about grit, the power of a compelling why. And it has been a great series, but I think today you're going to be moved, inspired, and I hope take something away that's going to significantly change your life, because I know just our initial dealings with Molei has changed ours. So what do you think you would do, or how would you react? How would you respond if you were to wake up after an accident and have been in coma for almost 3 months, be unable to speak or swallow, walk, and just a young person in your 20s? Doesn't matter, I guess, what age it is, but do you ever wonder how you might feel? Well, we're going to hear how Molei felt about it. I met Molei because we were talking books and publishers, and this was just not all that long ago, but I feel like I've known you a long time, Molei, and she is writing a book, and I'm glad you are, and it'll be coming out 6 to 8 months or so, and with a title to be determined. But Molei was generous and kind enough to let me read that manuscript, and I'll tell you, I was moved, very much moved and inspired, and so I wanted everyone to hear this story. So and thank you for coming, Molei. Thank you for being here, because there's a lot of people I think are going to be better for your story.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, should we jump in? You know, first of all, would you give us sort of I hate to say sort of a summary, because this is a huge journey, and I don't want to in any way minimize it, but could you give us an overview of what happened to you when you were in your late 20s?
Yeah, so when I was 28 years old, and my boyfriend and I decided to make a drive up to the mountain town, which we often did, to spend the night in his cabin up there. And so that way we could wake up the next morning and just have this short 15-minute drive rather than 3 hours from Denver. So on our way up to the mountains, a storm rolled in, and it was really bad, and we felt like, okay, that's okay, it'll just take us longer, we'll just take it slow, we're used to this. But on our way up on a mountain pass, on Kenosha Pass, a semi-truck was headed down and lost control and came in our lane and hit us head on. And then I was the worst hurt in the accident. I suffered a traumatic brain injury, and then I was in a coma from January 30th to May 18th. And so I woke up and just, honestly, when I was in the hospital and I had a whiteboard in my room, and it said, today is, and then it entered the date, you're at Craig Hospital kind of thing. And when I woke up, I saw it said it is May 18th. And the first thing that went through my head is oh, it's almost my Danny, my childhood best friend. It's almost her birthday. Not And then it hit me. I was like, wait, what? It's May? What happened?
Wow. And then it was a long journey forward, because when you woke up, as I said in the intro, you couldn't do much of anything, just kind of lie there.
Yeah, I couldn't talk to anyone. And it's weird because my eyes were open and things like that, but being in a coma before, my eyes would oftentimes open and I'd spastically sit up and lay back down, but no one was home. And my boyfriend always say the lights were on, but no one was home. So when the lights did turn on, they didn't know it was any different from before, So I had to try and convey, hey, I'm in here, someone please.
Wow. I told you it was compelling, folks. So look, it was a long time for you to get to where you are today, and we'll be talking about that. But we're talking about grit and compelling why. So what was your why? What got you through all of this work and rehab and setbacks and successes and relationships? Everything changes with this. What got you through that, Molly?
I think it's the things I'm most grateful for in life. My gratitude really got me through it, because things like my boyfriend, and I know this sounds silly, but even my dog, I remember thinking I have to get back home, otherwise what's gonna happen to my dog? He doesn't know that I'm in a coma. He thought I just left him. So, and then really it's just being grateful for I remember one time I was being tube fed by my mom. It was when I got discharged from the hospital. I was at home. And I just looked over and saw my yard out the front door, and I just remember thinking this is so nice that I'm not in my hospital bed. I'm so grateful for this.
We've talked about that as a trait of resilient people, and the gratitude, because there's always something to be thankful for, isn't there? Even with this. Wow. And that's something. Danielle, you got a question?
I do. I want to know how you got their attention when you mentioned waking up and them not knowing that you're back. That has got to be scary. I'm here. How did you finally break through?
Yeah, so I wrote about this moment in my book, and it was just another day in the hospital. My boyfriend came. He stayed with me every single night. He would come. He'd spend days with me, so we were just doing our new normal, and he took me down to the little place where he could get me out of my wheelchair and do gentle body stretches and things like that. And I like I mentioned before, I would oftentimes spastically sit up and lay back down. And the nurses would always be God, you must have abs of steel. But I was just I was not the Sleeping Beauty type of coma person. I was more like The Exorcist. I was not a calm comatose patient. So anyways, Jeremy, my boyfriend, was doing some stretches for me, and I spastically sat up, and he goes, "Whoa, girl, chill. We're not doing V-ups. Don't show off." And I thought it was funny because, one, I had never heard the term V-ups, and two, the thought in my mind that a comatose person trying to show off, that's just ridiculous. And when I laughed, to my surprise, a sound came out. And it was because before I tried to laugh, I tried to scream, I tried to cry, it didn't matter what I tried, nothing came out. But this time I stopped trying and a sound actually came out. And it shocked me just as much as it shocked my boyfriend. And he kind of looked at me "Oh my God, what did you just do? Did you just laugh?" So then he hugged me, and I just knew from then on, okay, I made my one connection, like he saw me.
Molei, it seems to me that, every little step of your very long recovery, you could have been considering yourself failing the whole time, or you could have considered yourself succeeding. And how did you determine that you were, I know you consider yourself to have succeeded. How did you define that? How did you determine that you were succeeding?
That's a good question, because I remember, there were times, trying to relearn how to walk and, how to eat and swallow. That was so hard. And there were so many times that I was like, oh, my God, I suck at this. I quit. I don't want to do this. So at the time, I considered myself failing. But I remember I told myself in my head, okay, you have one day. It's you have a pity day, and then it's get back to work. So at the time, I saw it failing, but now, in the longer term of things, when I can zoom out and look back, it's okay, no, I succeeded. That wasn't a failure.
It's we talk about progressing in any field, any lifestyle change or anything we do, and we talk about doing it in small steps. Yours had to be literally, but also figuratively, very small steps. And but look where they led, and that's just amazing. Danielle, I know you're bubbling over there.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I'm not more than curious. You already touched on it a little bit about how the accident impacted your life. So can you talk a little bit about, maybe what your life was before and what your day-to-day was in learning how to basically relearn things that you already knew, how to eat, how to walk, how to function. So can you give a snapshot then and a snapshot, say, during that recovery process?
Yeah, I think it's when I think of this, it's almost more of an appropriate question to ask, what didn't this accident change in my life? Because it changed everything, So before I was 28, I was working as a financial internal wholesaler, and I lived close to my work, so I walked to and from work every day. I went out on weekends for happy hours. I was living a normal life. And then this accident happened. It's I no longer work. I couldn't walk. I couldn't swallow. I couldn't talk. So when shortly after I woke up from my coma, I had to be well enough to handle my therapies, my speech therapy, my physical therapy, my occupational therapy. And so when I first woke up, I couldn't I could only stand, I could be awake for about 2 hours before getting mentally exhausted, so I couldn't handle any therapies in the beginning. So and not to mention, they didn't know I was awake. So it's they don't want to be teaching someone that isn't there, So once they figured I could handle therapies and benefit from them, then my days they gave me a schedule. So it would be from 7 to 8 is your breakfast time. And at Craig, they had a little cafeteria where all the patients could go and mingle, but I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't wheel myself. And I was being fed through a tube. So I didn't have, it was 7 to 8 for breakfast, which means a nurse came in to give me my morning bolus, which is the slushy food and med that they give you. And then starting at 8 to about 3 p.m. was full of different therapies. So physical therapy or speech therapy or occupational therapy. and each one was in a different room in the hospital. But since I was in a wheelchair and I couldn't wheel myself, I had a nurse wheel me to each different ones, And there I would slowly relearn how to occupational therapy taught me how to use my hands and my arms to push me in my chair, and speech therapy taught me how to communicate. So at first it would start with a little cardboard box that people would hold around their face, yes or no. They could track my eye gaze and be like, okay. Then I progressed. I could use a machine to talk for me. They could track my eye gaze. So I could say, I could look at I want, and then look at water. And then it would say, I want water, And then finally it was speech could teach me how to use my voice again and how to use my breath control. So everything was very small steps, it stinks if I were to compare my successes to the post-coma Molei to the pre-coma Molei. I mean, that's setting me up for failure, post-coma Molei is always gonna lose, but I just had to know, okay, this is my new life, there's no more comparing.
Wow. You know how powerful that is? I love it. Post-coma Molei. Post-coma Molei, I think most people who went through what you did would have naturally been consumed with themselves and their progress. But I read in your manuscript that when you were well enough, you went with Jeremy and you were teaching kids to read in elementary school.
Yeah. So I want to say, I still tutor now. I take tutoring very seriously. And before COVID, I was at 28 hours a week tutoring kids. Now I just got my 5th student. So virtual, it's been a bit of a challenge, but I'm getting there. And I think it means so much to me because all this time, when I was in the hospital and recovery, 3 years out, up until 3 years after the accident, everything was revolved around me. I had to learn how to walk for me. I had to learn how to talk. That's just for me, So I started feeling selfish and just uncomfortable, not good. And then I was living with my boyfriend, and he was like, hey, I tutor, I teach kids how to read. It's just, you should come along and say, I think you'd really like it. So I went along and tagged along for one of his sessions, and then it just progressed from being a bystander to actively taking on students.
Well, we talk about purpose, and we talk about giving back and being kind to others as traits of resilience. Well, here you are. You're a living, breathing model of that. Teresa, any other questions for you? I have one more that I certainly want to ask, but anyone else?
Yeah, I do have a question, Molei. I'm pretty fascinated with the science of post-traumatic growth, and you're certainly an example of post-traumatic growth. And, you mentioned comparing pre-accident Molei to post-accident Molei, and post-accident Molei loses every time. But what I'm curious about is, what did she gain?
Oh my gosh, I gained so much because, okay, so in my book I wrote, if the ghost of Molei future could go back and warn Molei, pre-Molei, not to get in the car that night, would I still get in the car? And I think now knowing what happened, I think I would still get in the car. But it's just because I've almost gained the true purpose in my life, and I've gained my morals and values and my gratitude. So
That's amazing to be able to say, to have to go through that recovery process, which how long was that whole rehab process? Was years, right? It wasn't like weeks. This was years of work.
Yeah. So everyone always asks, like, how long did it take to recover? And like, I kind of giggle in my head only because like, I'm still recovering today. Like, I will be in recovery for the rest of my life. But like, I was in the hospital for a total of 6 months, in a coma for 3, and then I was actively going to different therapies 3 years after the accident.
And that's amazing to still say I would do it over again just because of the ways that you grew as a person and the way that your perspective on life and giving back in life. That's remarkable.
That is truly remarkable. So, what's your life like today, Molei? What are you able to do, and what are you doing? And we're seeing you. You look lovely here, and you're articulate. So, can you explain or just describe for our listeners what your life is like now?
Yeah, I think. I mean, I think one of the only things I can't do now from than what I could have done before was work, because, I mean, I could work, but it's hard. It's really hard. If someone were to be hiring or interviewing me, it's me versus the other candidate. I'm probably going to lose, But I tutor daily kids how to read. I can pretty much do anything pre-Molei could have done. It's just I do it a little differently. But different is okay. For example, I kind of have bad ataxia, which is like shaky hands and things like that. So holding a glass of water, getting it from the kitchen to my room, I can't quite do that without spilling. So what I do now is just get bigger, taller glasses. So like I can only fill it here, and then if I shake it doesn't spill. Or like, no, I know now, like anytime you're stepping upstairs, you want to use your stronger side to lead with. So it's like, okay, when I go upstairs, I lead with my right and then my left. If I go down, it's opposite. So it's just little things like that. So
it's about accommodation, and you've certainly learned that, haven't you? Yeah. Another trait of flexibility, we call it, but accommodation, another trait of resilient people.
Yeah.
I have to say, with how much she's gained, in the book, there was a line that just knocked me back on my heels. That you were having a conversation with Jeremy, and Jeremy said, Molei, in that car, I watched you die. Mm. I think, the life was being drained out of you. She was resuscitated right there at the side. I can say that with a passer who was an EMT. But to be there and to go through what you did and to be here, you are a living treasure of lessons and of reminders of what's important in life. So here's the big question. What would you like to have I don't like the term takeaway as much as what would you like people to know and learn and appreciate and internalize from your story?
I think the biggest thing I want people to take away from hearing my story is just inspiration and always have hope. Just know there's always a way forward. Don't give up.
You mentioned the likelihood of you getting hired you think might be low, and I would offer that there are probably lots of people who would hire you in a hot minute, Molei. And so it makes me wonder what is your ideal, career or what is just your ideal future, whether that's career or just life?
Well, it's funny because when the doctors told me I'll never work again, I even told them, I was like, with all due respect, I'm going to prove you wrong. Like, I had in my head that, like, I'm going to work, and so before, when I was up to 28 hours tutoring, they actually offered me a job to tutor with them and get paid, but the only one they could get approved was for a full-time job. And I was like, I just can't do that right now. Like, and I started thinking back, I was like, I don't think I never want tutoring to get into, like, a place where I wake up and I'm like, oh, I have to go to work. Like, I don't want tutoring to turn into work for me. So I was okay turning down that job offer and being like, I'd rather just, like, I would rather just tutor when I can. And, like, luckily I'm in a spot because of the settlement where I can just tutor. Like, I'm not strapped for money, So I'm like, okay, like, I'd rather take my happiness over my pride,
There's another gem.
Now, you're in a virtual room full of writers and authors, so I'd like to really know your book. You're writing the book. Any idea when we can expect to see it and, the progress? How's that going?
Yeah, so I picked picking a publisher was really hard. It was a harder task than I thought it was going to be, but I picked my publisher, and they said anywhere like 6 to 8 months it'll take. So I just had my first meeting with the editorial staff, the copy editor. So it's still in the works. I have some, like, adding I want to do and, like, finishing it up, but I have a publisher and everything. So.
And you had the manuscript because Roger read it, so you got through, at least you have the first draft. So now it's just kind of massaging it and putting the glitter on.
Yeah, exactly.
I have to tell you, Molly didn't mention this, but I happened to see a news story in the records of you going up the mountain and doing some skiing.
Oh yeah,
with some accommodation. Yeah,
I love. Yeah, that's the other thing, that I just do it differently, but different is okay because now they first had me ski with, like, it looked like a walker on skis kind of thing, but that was way too easy for me. I was like, this isn't challenging enough. So then they gave me what they call outriggers, and outriggers are like poles with tiny skis on the bottom, just to give you more points of contact with the ground. And now I ski with outriggers.
Do you? Wow, yeah. That's something. When you were talking about why you would get in that car again, which is I'm sure it's put so many people. What? That's extremely powerful. And as the oldest person in the room here, I can see that can happen over decades, where you begin to see what's valuable. And what has happened with you at a very young age, for very unfortunate reasons, you have come to that realization of what's really important. And the younger we can do that, the better our lives can be.
So in a way, it's kind of like I'm lucky that something like this happened for me to realize, like, what's important in my life and how I want to live.
Molly, it's just been fantastic. I am so happy that you're writing this book. I know that you're in the middle of the manuscript, and it'll probably be some months before it's published, but you can count on us to make sure that we get the word out when it is. We'd like to perhaps have you back to talk about it when you finish the book, and have an update on you. And because, you talk about resilience. There it is. There's a vivid image of it.
You've been listening to Dr. Roger and Friends, The Bright Side of Longevity. If you like the show, please rate and review, and be sure to click to follow.